one of the stories has been that where if Sean Payton landed somewhere that Vic Fangio would go there with him. But Sean Payton landed at a place where Vic was just fired as the head coach. There were several reports that Vic was going to the Dolphins a couple of days ago, but nothing has transpired yet. On Monday, Mike Silver wrote, for what it's worth, Vic Fangio told me last night nothing's been decided. Silver said there is a huge amount of mutual respect between Kyle Shanahan and Fangio. It appears the Niners will have an opening soon, which they now do. Vic clearly has a good relationship with the 49ers organization. He's been around a ton. I think there was some sense the last two times Kyle needed like when Kyle got the job, there was the possibility that Vic would be a DC, but then I think Vic shortly thereafter or at the same time, I don't remember the exact timeline, became the Broncos head coach. Feels like that was shortly thereafter, but that was part of that timeline was Vic kind of felt like a natural Niners DC, but then he got a head coaching job. And then it's like you had D'Amico, so Vic wasn't going to get the job that time. Chris Wilkes, the Niners have reportedly requested. Steve Wilkes, thank you. Chris Harris, who just looks badass, football team DB coach, played in the league for 8 years. Great headshot. For those of you listening, go to his wiki and go to his Commanders team photo. It's fantastic.
Why does Del Rio always a part of staffs that are just like they're the staff that could beat up all the other staffs?
Because Del Rio number one quality alpha, only alphas only.
I mean,
so Blake on the stream says losing D'Amico hurt so bad. The best DC under Kyle. Where do we go from here? I don't think we have anyone on the staff at this moment that can step up in this role. And Severo says both Shanahan and Fangio seem grumpy. They'd make a great pair. Now, there is the issue of he has historically run a different defense than the 49ers have.
Fangio can be grumpy. From people that like literally with him, that worked with him in Chicago, I just think he's one thing
I don't think Kyle cares about that, right? Kyle
no.
Other coaches might be like, he offends me. I'm in charge.
No, because one thing you would say about Saul and D'Amico, they are upbeat, optimistic, glass half full guys. One thing I heard about Vic is he's really good with players. One thing that was an issue with him in Denver that he didn't have to ever deal with when he was in Chicago was, it's the defensive mindset. You can be grumpy if you're really good and also know what you're doing. But with the offense and quarterbacks, it can be difficult. And that was a downfall of his, which he's just a number two and there's nothing wrong. I think there's two ways to look at it. If you go with the simple philosophical belief, assuming that Cassera can coach with them because they coach schematically completely different things. If you think it's going to be no issue and it'd work and they think that would be fine. We know each other. We're buddies or we can be buddies. It's a big picture move. You're getting the best guy on the market because he is the best defensive coordinator on the market, not debatable. But scheme does matter, and it might take a little time because what I've heard, I have a very close friend that worked with him in Chicago. He said, it is stupid how good this guy is. Like he's a master. Like the way we talk about Kyle or Andy or even Sean Payton, like with scheme and how much they know their scheme, it's like this guy's a football fucking genius. And the best players on his team have had the best years when he's been their coordinator. Time in and time out. But it's completely different than you're with the Niners. And the one thing I think the pushback would be, if I was just on the outside looking in, do you want to risk a potential just transitional period, even if you have a lot of players that feel like could easily make the transition, but could take a step back in a year where you're kind of ready to win?
Well, I would say two things. One,
because I would imagine over the last month, it's been pretty clear throughout the season he was going to get a job, but like over the last month, Kyle knows he's gone. You've probably had these, like him and John have had these deep philosophical talks, like, 4-3, 3-4. And he's probably been ongoing because of the Vic thing, but it's a pretty big risk, even if you're getting the best guy on the market, given how good you've been running this specific defense now, right?
Yeah, and given that you have, like, I can see the first press conference after we've watched Nick Bosa drop into coverage 7 times, and people are like, why are we doing this? Is this really the best thing to do? Right?
He is pretty good with his pass rushers, though, right? Khalil, Alden,
Thing, like, Vic's been around the Niners a lot. I would imagine he doesn't just drop in, watch practice, and then leave without having a conversation with anybody. right? Whether it be Mike Shanahan or Chris Kasarik or Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch or Adam Peters, somebody, Jed York, about like what might it look like, and is it a guarantee that if the Niners hired Vic Fangio that they would switch to his historic defensive philosophy? Because like when Kyle Shanahan, who many people say is one of the best offensive minds in the game, and that everybody understands has a very specific system that he runs, when he has been in a situation where his quarterback doesn't do exactly what he generally does with RG3 in Washington and with Trey Lance at the beginning of this year, he changed what he does a little bit. He adjusted a little bit of what he does. So if Vic is every bit what your buddy says he is, like one of the great defensive minds, well, who's to say that he couldn't say, you know what? I will adapt to what you guys do. I think he's watched a lot of these practices, John. If there's any part of him that thinks he can meld what he's done with what Chris Kasarik does and what these guys do best, adapt to his personnel, wouldn't you say that's what the best coaches do? Adapt to their personnel. So,
well, the Patriots have been a consistent, fantastic defense for 23 years now, right? What's the New England Patriots defense, right?
Changes every week.
They don't have one.
Yeah.
Vic historically has been in a base 3-4
defense.
defense, and I think that's where the base 3-4 defense. Now, I think the modern day coach would be like, well, most teams come out in 3 wide receivers now. So you're just naturally immediately in a nickel situation where you have another DB and you take one of those pass rushers or defensive linemen, you morph immediately.
Could you?
I think depending on what teams you play, some teams are in 80% of the time. I think the league average was, I'm pretty sure I heard recently, high 60s, that you're in 3 receiver sets, which means you're in a nickel defense. Which
I can already hear the Kyle Shanahan press conference after they've hired Vic Fangio, and people are peppering him with questions about how is this going to work, and Kyle acts like they're the stupidest questions he's heard. Right?
If you think I'm going to fucking apologize for Croft blocking Hassan Reddick, you got another thing coming.
We did not have all the information. Of course, we can all say now I should have thrown the challenge flag, but Fox did not give me a good replay. But I can already hear it, and I'm not even mocking it. Like I can see Kyle Stanley going, wait a second. So I shouldn't have hired the best coordinator on the market because of what he's done historically? Vic's a really good coach. We got really good players. That's going to work, right? I can see Kyle explaining that in an in-depth way of how they're going to make it work. And I'd be willing to risk that. I'd be willing to say, let's see if Vic Fangio can work with Eric Armstead, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, Emmanuel Mosley, maybe Mooney Ward, Nick Bosa, and Eric Armstead. Did I say Armstead? Nick Bosa. Right? Like, let's just give it a shot. Let's take some of the best defensive players in the league and put them with the best defensive coach in the league and see if this bad boy can work with Chris.
And Vic, if you want to coach Kinlaw, who actually in theory should work in your scheme, don't watch the Eagle game. If you want us to cut Kinlaw, because that's what you will tell me to do, throw on the Eagle game.
Yeah. Or any of the other games.
Yeah, I'd say that one, it started off and looked like Grant was going to lose the battle. I'd say it aged, some of his comments didn't quite age as strong as the season went on.
Did get on the field. That part, he did get on the field consistently. But
if you just look at it from a simple perspective, hire the best guy. You can't justify. There is not a football coach in America that would rather have Steve Wilks or this, defensive back coach over Vic Fangio. It's not debatable. Now, if you factor in, like, if Kyle's like, I really want to run a 4-3 defense, or exactly what we've been doing up the field, wide 9, and Vic's like, I don't feel as comfortable, whatever, then yeah, I get it. But I think that.
But how if you're Vic?
I think Vic Fangio will be the defensive coordinator for the 49ers.
Well, there's been smoke around that hire for several years. It just hasn't lined up. Right?
It's lined up now.
It's lined up now. And if you're Vic and you have the choice of Denver, good defensive players, good head coach.
Is that Miami, a choice, though? Does any coach ever go back to where he's been the head coach that recently to be a position coach?
I heard Papa today say, what was the guy? The Chiefs guy, Gunther? Not Paul Gunther.
Yeah, Gunther Cunningham.
Cunningham. I guess he was close with the Hunt family. Just because you asked, only Greg would know. And then Miami has good defensive players, right? Good team. But Vic's been just hanging around the Niners for a long time. He's just been hanging around the Niners a long time.
Pretty clearly, Howie put him on the payroll because they knew they might lose their defensive coordinator and they wanted the opportunity, I'm sure. Like, he didn't just randomly put him on the payroll, right?
Yeah.
I would be – it doesn't feel like Gannon's going to get a job because he's not going to Texas. He's not going to Denver. Indy's taken. Or, excuse me, Carolina's taken. It doesn't feel like he's in the mix at Indy. I guess his only spot would be Arizona, that guy will just be back. Because if you told me that Gannon had taken one of these jobs, I'd be like, well, I imagine the Eagles are trying to get him too, right?
Yeah. Don't forget the point you made to me when we were texting about it the other day. Jed's chance to stick it back to Stephen Ross for the political battle that Stephen Ross won in local Santa Clara government by funding some project. So,
also, a way Fangio ends up getting more money, I would guess. Jed would have to pay him like $5.5 million a year than what he would have made if he, who Tom Sula got the job over him, the Jim Tom Sula at the time probably made like $3.5 million. So ultimately he gets.
You think it was 3.5? You don't think it was like 2.5? It was 3.5?
2014. Yeah. I mean, Pat Hill, when I was at Fresno State in like 2009, was making $2 million.
Yeah.
But whatever it was the lowest. But it was, he's going to get Jed back. Which I don't give Jed necessarily credit, but the Niners have done a good job of just not making it weird. Because sometimes in sports, when you have a crazy breakup, there is no coming back, right? Honestly, shocked Papa and Kyle Shanahan can even talk after what happened in 1991 with Mike Shanahan and Al Davis 75 years ago.
Yeah, well,
Raiders are a good example there. Once you were out, right?
Yes, the Raiders did not have the door only swung one way.
Yeah. Even Harbaugh made a comeback this year, which was interesting.
Which Harbaugh?
Remember Jim when he showed up at the anniversary?
Oh, yeah, with like 7 other people?
I think like 13.
I think it was 9.
It was missing a lot of people, yeah.
I think it was 9 people. And Jim showed up just...
It's, we're going to have a
guy you invite praying they say no. And then like, I'll love to be there.
We're going to have a team reunion for the team that won the division and lost in the conference championship. It was a little weird. Felt forced. But, maybe that was the 12 team, huh?
It was the 12 team. It was the 10-year anniversary of the 12 team. Yeah. Yeah.
No chance. Can't afford us.
There was one other story I was going to sneak in here. I don't know. All right, we'll be on Fangio watch. It would feel like a win of an offseason move. I do think fundamentally, whoever Kyle picks, the one thing that gives you some confidence with their defensive coordinator is that Kyle knows offense very well, and I think because of it, he knows defense really well. I think he knows who, now I don't know how much Steve Wilkes he's coached against, certainly Chris Harris, but Washington's defense was good. He's got a good feel for leadership. Like we'd say, he's 2 for 2 on hiring defensive coordinators. So,
one major difference between Kyle, Sean McVay, and LaFleur, like everyone thinks LaFleur's defense is suck year in and year out. Sean McVay, Wade Phillips, one and done Brandon Staley, and then Raheem Morris wins the Super Bowl, and their defense was awesome. And Kyle's 2 for 2 now. Like both those two guys clearly have a pretty good feel of what good defenses look like, and it's the reason. Obviously, this year was a terrible year for the Rams, but even the Niners that had a bad year in 20, their defenses always feel like they're solid. They value for being offensive play callers. I really value guys that are offensive play callers, and all they care about is the offensive scheme and like the team, but they really care about their defensive unit.
Yeah.
Like Andy would just be like, go buy some sweet players, and I'll just pay a shitload for a defensive coach, and you just run it. Like I do. Kyle, he's got cameras in their offices. I feel like McVay does that too. Like they're always kind of watching.
You are set up for success also if you become the Niners defensive coordinator, given the players they have, right? You would think it's kind of a high floor.
Well, I don't know if Fangio is like too caught up. Like someone's going to pay him a lot of money and he'll go wherever. I do think if I was one of these young coaches, like that DB coach for Washington, who maybe he's just now in the mix of some of these jobs, I would be all over this. I'd be like, Kyle, I will fucking take that job, man. You guys don't have to pay me as much. Like, I will be there yesterday. What do you need
honestly,
me to do?
if he gets the chance, you know what Kyle should do?
Could that guy play? Could that guy play
like
defensive tackle /
what's
linebacker?
What's the neck size that's big? Because that's a.
What do you think the Commanders' 6 a.m. Coaching workout looks like? You know, when they're in the gym in the morning.
You can't take anybody's coach unless you make them the coordinator, right? Because ideally you get Vic. Although Vic, you know, the thing that Vic would also bring, he's not about to go become somebody else's head coach in all likelihood. Like, you're not losing Vic Fangio in 2 years. He's not getting another head coaching job.
Well, that's the safest part about it. The big picture. And I think I was telling someone this, maybe you, one thing Andy has in Spags is like, where's Spags going? It's as good as it gets. Like, this is Spags. He could have Spags for like 8 straight years. Kyle could have Vic Fangio probably till he retired. If you hired, the Steve Wilkes, hell, if you hired the UC Davis Denver Bronco guy, that guy could be a head coach next year, right?
I don't know if Wilkes would be, but Evero for sure.
I would say Wilkes, like, what if their defense was just number 1 again? And it was like he was almost a job. He at least could be interviewing for jobs.
Yeah,
next
he
year.
could be. I mean, he has not failed. Like, 1 year in Arizona, which is a mess anyway. And then won games, relatively speaking. Carolina won more games when he became the coach. I'm Elliot says Damon Bruce gave you some love the other day. D. Bruce has always supported the ham operation, so we appreciate that.